Hi. Oh, wow. It's great to be here. And thank you so much, Gail, for allowing me this opportunity. I've been following alternative venues for jazz, I think, pretty much since you started it. And, but it was also nice to see you for a moment and say hello because we've known each other for a while. Hi, everybody. Uh, Gail sent me some prompts, ideas for things that I might talk about. And there were a couple of things that sort of jumped out at me, kind of tickled my fancy. The first one was she asked, what was the first jazz album you bought with your own money? Say that the first jazz albums I acquired, I actually did not spend my own money for. I borrowed them from my parents. This was one of them. Let's see. This was one of them. And I'm showing you these because you can see that even though I borrowed them, somehow I never gave them back. But the first ones that I bought myself, I think it was like maybe I bought these at the same time. I believe it was Stanley Turrentine Sugar Man and Freddie Hubbard, First Light. I think went through a CTI phase. Something else it was fun to think about that. I liked that question, made me think back. Another question that Gail suggested that jumped out at me was, what advice did you receive from an older musician? And two pieces of advice I remember. I met the guitarist Michael Howell on a gig with Laurel Watson. I don't know if some of the people in New York remember Laurel Watson, who was quite a presence. So I saw him on a gig with her, and I started calling Michael for gigs, and I was pretty green at that time. We still play together years later. In fact, we have a gig in the Poconos coming up in July. And at that point, I was writing charts by hand, and it was before I had notation software. My handwriting is not particularly neat, so I was being really meticulous. And the first piece of advice, it sounds so obvious, he said, write your chord symbols big enough for people to see them. The other one, something I've never forgotten, because I learned a lot from him through the years, was that early on, we had this steady gig, like twice a week at this bar. And sometimes people would come up and say something like, they'd ask for a Sinatra song, or which, if you're talking about standards, which is what I was doing at the time, could be almost anything. Or they might ask for something like Memory from Cats or something. And when someone would ask me for a particular song, I felt like, oh, I have to do that song, but maybe it's not in my book, or Memory, Cats. And I didn't really know how to handle it. And Michael said something really interesting to me. He said, a lot of times when someone comes up to you on a gig like that, what they're really trying to do is to connect with you. It's not necessarily about the specific song. They feel a connection, or they're enjoying the music, and they want to talk to you and to make a connection with you. And that was great advice. It was really helpful, and it kind of changed something for me. And I love that feeling of audience interaction. I love the feeling of the energy that I get from an audience. I don't like, even if I'm on some kind of big stage with the house completely dark, I always ask them to bring the lights up a bit, at least. I like to see people. Gail also suggested as a question, how did you get into jazz? So I think I'm going to turn that around a little bit and say, how did jazz get into me? Because I think of it that way because this music has taken me places that I never expected to go. And I think for me, that's one of the most exciting things about it. It's really stretched me as a person. Um, Growing up, I did hear some jazz. I mean, those albums, a few others, but it wasn't a major part of the soundtrack of my growing up. And I always sang, but I didn't have lessons on an instrument. I was not one of those kids sitting in my bedroom writing songs on a guitar. In college, I was listening to jazz, and I had this little fantasy about singing jazz, but it wasn't something I really thought that I could do or um, pursued seriously in any way. Um, but at a certain point, I had moved to New York. I was actually, I had gone to acting school and done auditioning and done some acting and, you know, all the things people do, waiting tables, working in offices, just crazy jobs that you pick up here and there. Um, and at a certain point, I was going through some things, as we do, personally and professionally. Um, and hello, Destiny. Thank you. Someone just said hello in the chat. So I had reached this kind of point where I was just not really sure what I was doing, kind of at loose ends. And I was singing a little bit, but not really much. And almost by chance, I found myself at sort of a bend in the road. And, do I take that? Do I keep going the direction I was going? Do I take the bend in the road? And I took the bend in the road. And it led me to jazz. And it felt great. It felt like home. It's funny because it felt like home, but there was so much I didn't know. So I just started to immerse myself in the music. And this is where I say through the years, it's led me places I didn't expect to go because I like a lot of jazz singers. I started out singing standards. I knew a lot of those songs just from hearing them growing up. But I really never expected to be an improviser, a composer, an arranger, a teacher. I had no clue any of that was in my future. But as it turned out, they were. And this is why I think jazz getting into me has been such a huge gift, because it's really opened up a lot of creative portals for me. And I don't know, I've come to think of this music as something in the nature of jazz as being very expansive. And I guess maybe not everybody agrees with me on this, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But I feel like when I was starting out, because of the way I started out, kind of in an old school way, even though I came to it later, mostly learning on the bandstand and then finding my teachers privately and all of that. Destiny is asking me, in what way expansive? Thank you. I'm going to get there. That's a good question. I will get there, I promise. So in addition to some of the musical and sonic qualities that I kind of absorbed as being part of the nature of this music that we call jazz, I also absorbed some ideas like that, having your own voice, and I mean the word voice to apply to everybody. It doesn't matter what instrument you're on. I mean, having your own something to say, something to express that's uniquely you, is a a value in this music. And I also came to understand the music, looking at the history of how the music has developed, as music that is meant to keep evolving and embracing. And this, in this way, I would say it's expansive, embracing more and more ideas and influences. And so that, to me, that's kind of how it's expansive, that it's meant to keep evolving and to keep embracing more ideas and all of that. Let's see. So because of that, I haven't felt it necessary to I once heard somebody say that jazz is a big tree with many branches, and I like that metaphor. And I haven't felt it necessary to limit myself to one branch of that great tree. So to put it another way, if jazz exists on a continuum, and at one end of that continuum is, let's say, straight ahead jazz, and at the other end of that continuum is more avant-garde jazz, free jazz, and so forth, I feel that if I move to express music anywhere along that continuum, why not? Why not? I still love singing standards. I write music. I have taught songwriting. And for me personally, coming up with standards, that was a great school for songwriting. Those songs tend to be so well constructed. The harmony, the melody, the rhythmic feel, everything works together. The lyrics, of course, everything works together to express an idea. So I cherish that music. I feel really grateful that I came up on that. And I love singing music that's more, let's say, what's called adventurous. I love improvising freely. So, example, for years I sang in a straight ahead big band led by Art Lillard. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a little water. And at the other end of that continuum, I guess, I've done several projects for free jazz icon. I put in air quotes because that doesn't begin to cover bassist William Parker. In fact, in June, he's getting a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Vision Festival, and I'm going to be singing in an excerpt from one of his very large and amazing projects called Trail of Tears. And I think I recorded another album for him last November that I think is coming out soon, I hope, of his music. I was in a performing group with someone who was a great inspiration to me, and then a friend, someone we lost very recently, Jay Clayton. Speaking of Jay, she's also someone who modeled that she could be herself and express this beautiful music at many points along this continuum. People like Jean Lee, also a model and inspiration. Judy Silvano, a friend who is doing all kinds of great music at various places along this continuum. So yeah, so I do some side person work. And in fact, next Thursday, I'll be singing backup at the CD release gig of my friend Brenda Earl Stokes. She's got an amazing project called Motherhood. The music is really great. And the backup singers on her album are Melissa Stiliano, who some of you may know from the Duchess group, and Nicole Zaritis, who just won the Grammy for Best Album. So Nicole can't make it, so I'm filling in for her. And that's Brenda Earl Stokes' project next Thursday at Drome. But speaking of CD release concerts. I have one of my own coming up. I'm on several other people's albums, but I have been slow to put out my own albums as leader. I've been singing jazz in town for a few decades, and these days, having only put out 4 albums of my own is considered not much. But we're all on our own paths, and what can I say? But I'm very excited about this album. It's called Wanderlust. It looks like this. And this one is on my own label. The last 2 are on record labels. This one is one I'm doing completely myself, which has been a huge education in releasing music, especially because so much has changed since my last one came out. My last one, Parallel Lives, came out in 2011. I know, it's a long time. But we recorded it last March 2023. I'm really thrilled about how it came out. I want to tell you about the people on it. On piano, John DiMartino. On bass, Ken Filiano. Michael T.A. Thompson on drums. And that's the rhythm section. And these aren't all people you think necessarily would play together, but I've been playing with all of them for a number of years, and it's been really, really, really cool. And then Jeff Lederer on clarinet and flute and co-producing, and Charlie Burnham on violin. And I just think, in addition to my just being so happy to actually finally have done this, I think it's got a great sound, if I'd say so myself. And it was officially released last month. I'm happy to say that the reviews are coming in, and some of them have been pretty amazing. I wish I was one of those people who said, "Oh, I don't read reviews," but it's really nice when you feel like they get it, when they get what you want to communicate and they like it. It's a nice thing. So we're starting to get some radio play. The music is a mix of covers and originals. One of the things I liked about the covers that I picked for this is that they're mostly by major figures, but not the most well-known songs. So I've got this gorgeous song by Ray Charles and Rick Ward called Light Out of Darkness. Shirley Horn recorded it. But it seems like most people don't know this song. And it's a song that was released first, I think, in 1965. And it is so much, it just speaks so much to the time we're in right now. And that's the first single that I released. Everything is available now on Bandcamp. The entire album, but on the streaming services, I'm rolling it out a little more slowly. So Light Out of Darkness is available on all the streaming services right now, except maybe Napster. I think I kept it off of Napster. And so you can go hear it now, which I hope you will do, because every time it's played, that helps a little bit. The second single is being released May 17th. That's called Dog Day Afternoon. It's a gorgeous song by a writer named Wayne Carson, who wrote You Were Always on My Mind, that Willie Nelson song. I've got an Abbey Lincoln tune, not the one most people do, throw it away, but I've got The Music is the Magic by Abbey Lincoln. I've got a Sting tune that I don't think is very covered at all, called I Burn for You. And let's see, is there one more? I think maybe that's everything. And then I've got several originals. Carole King, a Carole King tune called, oh, that's terrible, Been to Canaan, a Carole King tune. And then there's several originals. some of which have kind of fun literary references. A song I wrote called Nevermore, which thankfully is not autobiographical because it's about a not very healthy relationship. There's a happier song called The Winter of Our Content, which borrows lines and phrases from Shakespeare. I've got a song called Still Life. The title is a play on words because it mentions a painting in the song, but it's really, there's a person whose life is going on after someone else is no longer there. I've got a song called The Nature of Life. This is a piece that I wrote early in the pandemic shutdown. You know, so much seemed topsy-turvy, right? Politically, ugh. And then COVID came along and none of us knew how long that would last, how long it would be till we could work again, how long till we could see our friends and families. And spring was arriving, and I was thinking about how one of the major lessons I've learned just in life is that things change. Things always change. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But when I feel that there's a stuck place, I just remember things will change. Sometimes we need a little patience. And I was thinking about how nature really models that for us. So, every day, dark turns to light, light turns to dark. Winter turns to spring, tides come in and go out. And so I wrote this kind of simple lyric called The Nature of Life, and that's on the recording. And then there's two wordless vocals, one called Sobidesh, which is Portuguese for up and down, and one called Eventide, that in fact I intended to have on the recording only as an instrumental, but my co-producer Jeff Lederer made me go back and double the melody behind, not in front. The instruments are the lead melodic instruments on that one. And there's one more song that on the album that's freely improvised. And I was skeptical that it would work because the music is called Wanderlust. The album's called Wanderlust because the music travels. It travels. There's some pretty straight ahead stuff. Like I said earlier, there's this continuum. It travels along my personal jazz continuum. So, as I mentioned, it's on Bandcamp, and it's on more in full. It's slowly being rolled out on the streaming services, but you can find me on Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon and all of those, and Andrea Wolper, and find me and follow me, I hope. And on Apple, I guess you can pre-save the album now. And if you're in the vicinity of New York, I really hope you'll come to our concert. We'll be celebrating this new recording on May 22nd, which is a Wednesday at Pangea. And I will tell you, it is not easy to pull together a band of 6 people. These are in-demand musicians. To find a date that works for 6 people is not easy. To find a venue, it ain't easy. So this is an opportunity to hear this music live and see this wonderful group. And I hope that people will come Wednesday, May 22nd, 7 p.m., one set at Pangea. All the info is on my website, of course. So time to wind down a little bit. Were there any, let me just see if there are any other questions. I think I answered the question. What other influences? Well, part of my evolution. Okay, so I'm being asked what other influences part of my evolution. Musically, I think that everything that I listen to, or at least listened to and liked musically through the years, is some kind of an influence. And I tend I'm going to be teaching this class coming up, jazz singing for voice teachers. It's for teachers who are not jazz singers, but they may get a student who says, "Oh, I'm curious about jazz," and they need to know a little bit of something. Not that they're going to become jazz teachers, but they maybe need to know a little bit so they don't steer their student in the wrong direction. And so in a situation like that, I kind of have to define something that I think is too big to be defined, really, and pinned down. But personally, as I said, I think that all the music that I have listened to and absorbed influences me. And I do think that exploring free music has made me a better singer of straight ahead music, and singing straight ahead music has made me a better improviser. I think it all feeds together. I also have a history as a freelance writer. Done a couple of books and a lot of articles, and that working with language, I think, is another influence for me, another big part of who I am as a musician. Structure, language, the way words work together to express something. Yeah. And of course, I don't want to start naming specific musicians because I know I would leave some out and then be kicking myself afterwards. But I don't know. I think that we find our inspirations as we go along, and I guess that's one of the other things as I wrap up that I would say I love about a life in music, which is that there's always more to learn. There's always more to learn. And that, to me, is something that keeps us vibrant and young in a way. It's not always easy, but I think the fact that we can always continue growing, and I think we all know that the best musicians are the musicians who want to keep, who know that there's more they can do, no matter how great they are, no matter what heights of fame they reach, that there's more creativity and more to learn and more to express. And so for me, that's really the biggest gift of this music, is that there's always more. Another person who started out as a teacher became a great friend and a colleague, the great Connie Crothers, talked so much about expression and feeling, and how everything really came from expressing feeling when we go way back. And to me, that's kind of it. That's the ultimate. So I see that it's time for me to wrap up, and I want to thank you for listening, and thank you again, Gail, for having me today. Yeah. And I guess that's about it. So thank you so much.